Good morning. We will begin today's webinar in just a few moments in order to allow participants to sign in. Welcome, everyone. I'm Karen Curtin, Regional Resource Director for Caron Treatment Centers on Long Island. Thank you for joining us for the 12th installment in our webinar series, A View from the Mountain, Caron's Perspective on Addiction Treatment in the Wake of COVID-19. Today marks a transition in our webinars. For the next 3 weeks, we are starting a series called Focusing on Family Systems, How Caron Stays Connected to Families in Non-Traditional Ways. Today's topic focuses on addiction, families, and COVID-19. Experts from our Pennsylvania and Florida family programs will tell us how they have continued to engage with families throughout the pandemic. With the nature of this webinar being an open discussion rather than a didactic lecture, we are not offering continuing education for this presentation. As a reminder, we will be conducting this session in webinar format and all participant microphones will be muted. During the presentation, we encourage you to utilize the Q&A feature to ask any questions you may have. Depending on the number of questions, if we cannot get to yours before the hour is up, we will have someone from our team follow up with you directly. Now we will welcome today's presenters. Ryan Hansen is the Executive Director of Caron Renaissance in Florida. Ryan supervises leadership staff, oversees daily operations, provides clinical oversight, and works with patients, families, and referrants to strengthen collaborative relationships. Ryan previously served as the Director of Family Services at Caron Renaissance, overseeing programming for the Family Department and providing clinical care for patients and their families. Melinda Castro is a family therapist at Caron's Grandview Executive Program in Pennsylvania. In her role, she works with patients and families to better understand their family systems and improve communication and relationships. Seeing those aha moments occur and the resulting change that takes place is what she loves most about her job. And last, we have Vanessa Summer, who is a family therapist in the Healthcare Professionals Unit in Caron, Pennsylvania. Vanessa has implemented a specific family program for healthcare professionals, focusing on the distinctive needs of clients in the medical and mental health branches. She focuses on educating family members about the impact of addiction and gives them a voice in treatment. Please join me now in welcoming Ryan, Melinda, and Vanessa.
Good morning, everyone. So here at Caron Warnersville, COVID-19 has really allowed us to evolve in our way of providing services to the families that we serve. And as the US started the stay-at-home orders, we temporarily increased our communication for the patients to be able to reach out to their families to check in. We as a provider called families to inform of the safety procedures that were being followed, to work towards safety of their loved one and staff. And then as of right now, communication has returned back to normal. As far as visitation, we're not allowing visitors right now at this time on campus. We have here in Berks County returned to green phase. However, that just started this week. And so we are still going through our typical safety procedures with checking temperatures of patients as well as all employees. So right now we are not allowing visitors on campus. But being able to utilize WebEx has been an easy way for families to connect and receive some family programming and education while maintaining their confidentiality. We've actually seen an increase in our family engagement during this time. Next slide. And as a result of, the stay-at-home orders, families have really been able to utilize that time and just kind of slow down in their lives. And so we do contribute that as a result of our increase in our family participation, as well as WebEx just being easy for families to be able to log in, being able to join whether they have Wi-Fi or not. We've also found that families are less nervous knowing that there isn't face-to-face interactions with other families during that first time. It is a new experience for many families to be able to start talking about the addiction and the experiences that they faced. And so we've actually seen an increase in just participation during our WebEx because it provides that safe place for families to talk with one another and actually speak openly about their experiences, and yet feel a little bit more relaxed that they're not face-to-face with other families. And so we've also increased our output of resources by using videos, readings, online support groups, as well as links for other services. So we've been able to connect our families, to what they really need. And in that, it's provided the families the opportunity to access whatever it is that might benefit them at their convenience, based on their schedules, based on time zones, based on where they're at in the country. We've also seen, families participate from all around the world in the WebEx just because there is now that flexibility. Next slide. And so having just having family sessions via WebEx has also provided relief to some of our families, because now during this time of isolation and not being able to visit their patients here on campus, that's provided them an opportunity to be able to see them face to face. And so that is something that families ask us, if there is a way to participate and see their loved one, face to face. And so WebEx has really been able to open that up for us. And as a result, again, we tailor our family services to meet the needs of the family system, which includes collaborating and speaking to other providers, so that other providers are well aware of maybe some of the work we've done here with the family, or the assessment that we've done and what they would benefit from receiving. And so we've definitely been able to continue that streamline of coordination of services. And currently here in Wernersville, we're working on our next phase, which is how to evolve our family program to be more interactive between the patients and the families. Again, we do provide homework, and Vanessa will get into more of that, but we want to be able to engage the patients and the families a little bit more therapeutically in some group processes. And so that's the next part of our phase here in Wernersville. Next slide.
Good morning, my name is Vanessa, and as we are progressing through the changes at Caron, Wernersville, we have also recognized that there is a distinct need for some separation in our programming. Earlier in the year, we created a signature group of signature programming, and then we also created core programming. When we did that, we also separated our family programs. What I'm going to talk to you about today is the two ways that both signature and core programming are addressing the needs of our families during the COVID experience that we're having in our country. As Melinda said, we are moving into green stages, and as we move into that, we will be allowed to facilitate more WebExes programming for our families. We are going to be able to even expand on some of our programming. But right now, currently, what we are doing is a twice monthly education program for our families in Signature. It is geared towards the necessity and the needs of our families. During that time, they are allowed to engage with us. They can ask questions. They are allowed to have a chat. And as we go through the education material, they are learning about the addictive process in a family, the impact of addiction on the family, and coping mechanisms that they can take from the webinars into their lives and start to develop an idea of what family recovery will mean to them. Also, as we said, that there are weekly therapeutic calls with the family therapist. The family therapist role in the Signature family programs is a new experience for the changes we're making here at Caron. The family therapists in Signature programs are only for the unit that they're working on. As we said in our introduction, Melinda works at Grandview. That is the program she will do any kind of therapeutic interventions with as far as families and the clients that we're working with. I am on the healthcare professional unit, and I will work with the medical professionals here and the clients and their families. And then we have an older adult unit, and their clinician and family therapist will work with the patients on that unit. The reason we are doing this is to necessitate greater engagement with families, but to also give them the option of getting support and help for their own independent needs, excuse me. So as we go through this, we want you to understand that we are looking at this as an individualized treatment for each patient and their families with their own goals, their needs being addressed, increasing the willingness of family to participate, as some of them are dealing with resentments and concerns, as well as having multiple experiences in treatment. So increasing their willingness and also looking at what their self-care priorities are. So as we go through therapeutic calls with families, we're really developing a whole session with them. And then each session leads into more work that they are doing at home. So that increases their accountability as well as their response, not just to the clinical team, but also to the needs of the therapeutic process for their loved one. We do weekly progress updates, and that is done with clinical staff. Individualized treatment planning is something that we are introducing for families and coordinating it with the clients. And as we go through this, we can also give assignments to the family and share that on WebEx in sessions with their loved one. And another issue that we just kind of briefly talked about previously is the crisis management utilization. One of the things that we have experienced here is that we can use WebEx and we can use family sessions more effectively in addressing patients who want to leave against staffing advice or leave against medical advice. So I briefly wanted to note the necessity for us to have a very open line of communication and to have a family therapist working with the families prior to events happening around crisis, so that they can start getting coaching and understand what to say and be less reactive to the situation and more grounded in the responses. And we can also address continuing care needs of the family. So we'll be able to look at what does each individual family need for their own health and well-being and continued recovery. Next slide, please. Treatment interventions that we're continuing to look at are based, again, individually on the family, but we can look at attachment styles in the family. What are the systems in the family as well as subsystems? Who else is involved as far as concerned persons? The dynamics of the family are certainly a part of all the interventions that we are working on. Are there communication needs? Are there boundary needs? Is there a healthy system in place that we can draw upon? We also want to look at continuing care recommendations for families. As we start to realize that the patient is going to have a plan for themselves, we realize the families also have their own necessity to get support. So we have My First Year for families. We have the breakthrough option for families to come and work on some of their own historical needs, regional support groups, and we'll also look at 12-step for families such as Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, and clinical care options, which could include getting a family therapist or a counselor for themselves. We want to give the family basic skills, but we also want to give them practical skills. So some of the practical skills that we have been looking at are really helping them address their own self-care needs. What is it that they feel that they are lacking in and could use some encouragement in? So self-care work is going to be a priority, but coping skills also can relate to relapses issues, questions that they have around recovery. If they're starting to feel anxious about their loved one coming home, we may do anxiety relief. We look at mindfulness and ways that they can address some of their own anxieties. We can do follow-up calls with families after discharge, and if needed, we can even give them recommendations and suggestions as they progress in early recovery with their loved one. We want to also give families an idea of what kind of contact they're going to have with their loved one here in treatment. So during some of our signature family program sessions, we're going to talk about what are your most anxiety-provoking thoughts are coming up about talking with your loved one in communication. And while they're here in treatment, what are some of the things that you feel you need to address about coming home? How is the home for the patient when they return? Do we need to address perhaps addictive issues that are in the family as well? So as we're talking about all of these in sessions, we're also preparing the patient. So we do clinical sessions with the patient so that when they start to initiate communication independently from the sessions, they have some ready, available coping skills to deal with the struggles that they might have typically experienced when they were home. Patients have access to their phones, and they can call their families on a daily basis here in the Signature Family programs. And we can give them work that they can do in those sessions when they are talking to one another without staff present. We have extended communication options for the patients where they can also email and they can also use FaceTime with their families. So we may give them a specific assignment that they can gear towards those times when they are having conversations with each other. Clinical staff is available over the weekend. However, family therapists are not here. So we may give some assignments over the weekend for them to look at some of the things that they're experiencing and the changes they would like to encourage in their family system. So much of what Melinda and I are doing is around the families being fully engaged in the process and really looking at their own accountability and their own recovery needs and self-care. So we're taking the focus off the client who's here in treatment and really putting the focus back on the family. As we move through some additional notes about the signature family programs, is we can also allow for insight sessions with referrals. And what I mean by that is if it is necessary, we can certainly conference the referral into a call. We can also talk with the referrals to get a better idea of what they've been working on with the families and independently from Caron, what they feel the family is really looking at. And as Melinda shared with you, having a family therapist allows us to address some of the groups in family systems who might not always have the same experience that families who had a greater interaction with counseling staff or even the family education program were allowed to have. So one of the great things about the WebEx possibilities that we're using and expanding on is the caretakers as well as high-risk groups, individuals who cannot come to the treatment center, who cannot physically come to our location, will have equal access to all the sessions and the information. We can even dial in those who are dealing with international attendants who are unable to travel from other countries to this country. So again, everyone in the family can be included. Any concerned person who's working with their loved one after treatment is going to be invited to be a part of the process. So the accessibility of WebEx is one of the main components that has really started to benefit not only the increased involvement of families, but their interest. And what I find personally is families want to be a part of this now, because there is a level of investment they're making. So sessions are going to be more conclusive, and we're also finding that we can graduate through the process of their own goals. And as we do this, we find out there's very few restrictions on what we can do in settings, as well as some of the things that we do need to address are easily more accessible for us to get answers and solutions. The intensive family focus is going to be more around communication, and we can actually act out some of the roles and scenarios that families experience at home because we have the increased contact through WebEx. Solutions and problem solving, that becomes more effective because there is on-site engagement. And as we said, there's assignments that are given. So again, everyone is moving forward in looking at how they're going to start taking the skills we're teaching them into their homes and grow with them. The core family programs, switch slide, please. Core family programs have a little bit of a difference than our signature family programs, but they're still very inclusive and expanding. One of the things that the core family programs is each week they are doing a one-day WebEx educational process. They are looking in the same areas, giving families a functional understanding of addiction, looking at what they have as far as an impact on the family. Again, each family system can be uniquely different in the impact. They look at the progression of addiction in the family and the response of the family, and look at other options as far as reactions and responses to some of their own triggers for enabling. So they're looking at triggers, they're looking at feelings, they're addressing some of the solutions that family needs for their own health and well-being. Weekly calls and updates are done by the primary therapist. The primary behavioral therapist is going to act in the same way that the signature family program therapists will. So they are going to do weekly updates. They're going to give insight to the family on things that they can start to address at home. They're going to create a continuing care plan with the family and look at the reality of what the patient will be dealing with in early recovery and start getting coaching and skills. Now, depending on the needs of the family, a family therapist or a family counselor from the core family program will join sessions, and they'll come in if there's a conflict. So they may address how to disarm the conflict in a family. What are fair fighting rules that could be more impactful for the family to use? If there are family dynamics or children involved, give some education and tools to the family so that they can better address the questions of children or address the dynamics. They also give supports. So some of the support options will be the same as signature family programs, looking at my first year of recovery as well as breakthrough, but they will make sure that the families get information on regional groups in their area, Al-Anon, other supports that are a necessity for them. And families do have contact with their loved one, even though they are not seeing each other in visitation, they have increased contact in phone calls. So core family programs have some limits on that. But the limits are minimal in comparison to not having any contact other than through clinical support. Patients can call their families for 15 minutes daily, and they can use our phones. So if they do not have any devices here for themselves to use, we'll give them access to our own phones. And then there is an extended call time on Sundays so that family and patients can stay in contact, and also give feedback to the primary behavioral therapists on how the calls are going. So just to give you some basic insight and awareness, that is some of the things we're looking at here at Caron and Warnersville, and we are consistently growing as we move through the same issues and concerns that many of our colleagues are dealing with in regards to COVID. Thank you very much, and I'll switch it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Vanessa and Melinda. I think it's so exciting to be able to talk about some of the consistencies across the Caron continuum and our commitment to family services, and also to be able to address some of the nuances that make our clinical programming so exciting and so relevant to the different populations that we serve. So I'd like to introduce myself as Kelly Grant. That's a joke, and that is also part of why we get to talk about the use of technology and some of the challenges that we have, but also, as both of you ladies have already talked about, some of the really exciting ways that we've been able to grow, and the necessity is the mother of invention. We've really been able to expand our services and eliminate barriers for so many families in ways that we would never have thought of. So while this awful pandemic has certainly ravaged our country, the things that we have been able to do as a result of that clinically have been really exciting, and they're things that we don't intend to give away, once we're past this particular crisis. So I want to talk just briefly about Florida's services and identify a few things before I jump in. And that when we're talking about Florida services, we're talking about a couple different programs, but there are some consistencies in our family services. So I just want to identify what some of those programs are. Those are our Caron Ocean Drive program, which is our clinically rigorous executive level programming. Caron Renaissance, which includes our digital use disorder track. Caron Renaissance, which treats our emerging adults or young adults, what you want to call that, failure to launch or emerging adults, really helping take a look at our folks that have struggled academically or struggled vocationally, emotionally, to move into a consistent and meaningful adulthood, and helping them and their families with that. And our professionals track, which treats individuals and their families, and those folks have had some success vocationally or economically, but they haven't been able to put all the pieces together, or if they've had moments of success, those things have been undermined due to unresolved family issues or generational issues, process-driven disorders, untreated or undertreated mental health needs, and certainly substance use as well. And so they and their families need a level of support in order to get back on track. And so those are the populations that we're really serving here in Florida. Next slide. So all of our Florida services are created through the lens of family systems treatment. We really focus on intensive and thorough assessment. And you've heard that through both of the previous explanations or presentations as well, is that we're looking at each individual member of the family system, and really helping somebody to identify what their needs are within their family system. And those of you who are familiar with Florida services, we have a slogan: the family is the patient and the patient is the family. And really helping everyone in the system identify that they deserve the opportunity to have their needs met. And that when we do that, the sum of the whole becomes greater than just the sum of its parts. But that really does focus on very thorough assessment. When we talk about trauma within family systems, and we know this, that the families are impacted on a primary, secondary, and tertiary level in many circumstances, where they may have experienced chaos or violence within the home. And certainly that has impacted many families who come to us. Without that, we're also watching our loved ones struggle and make life and death decisions without the ability to contain or control the decisions that they're making and the behaviors that they're choosing. And family members feeling out of control and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy by trying to regain control over the loved one, which is a losing proposition under almost all circumstances. So helping families to see how we can help that and help the individual family member control the one member of the family that they do have some say over, which is themselves. But that really has to happen on an individualized basis. This was mentioned before as well, but we really want to connect with the professionals and the referents who sent that family or that loved one to us, because generally they have more information, and many times the family members are headed back to them after the course of treatment. So I'm really excited that we include everyone on a collaborative level when we're making our assessments, when we're developing treatment plans for the individual, and that we're identifying not only the care plan during the course of treatment and the timing of interventions during the course of treatment, but also when we're talking about transition and continuing care planning following treatment. Next slide. So in Florida, all of our family members are assigned both a primary and a family therapist. And they're working with, the primary therapist is working with the loved one who's here under our roof and identifying what are their needs and doing that thorough assessment and treatment planning and treatment that's happening here. And they're driving the course of that in a collaborative way. However, that primary therapist is also having a weekly phone call with the family to talk about what are we seeing? What are we not seeing? Where's the level of recovery being demonstrated under our roof? How would we quantify that? And how does the family experience those changes, or how are they not experiencing some of those changes? Because it also gives us an opportunity to think about treatment in a parallel process, both for the loved one under our roof and for the multiple family members who are at home. So have they seen this behavior before? How have they been impacted, or how have they responded in the past? And so this is an opportunity then for the family members to identify some of their patterns in response to their loved one and to make some decisions about what is in their best interest and their own self-care and what needs do they have as a part of the treatment process, and how can those become of equal value. So as we look at the length of stay, and this has been mentioned already today, but we can look at including different components of the family system. So if we talk about someone who is in our professionals track who is married and might have minor children at home, how is that spouse able to be involved? And because we're doing some of this work virtually, they can pop into groups, they can pop into sessions, they may be able to do some intensive work via teleconference. Their kids, we can help talk about with their referents. What resources in the home area do they need? How can we help them get connected to the type of care they need based on what impact they have had? That person's parents, who may or may not be involved on an emotional basis or on a financial basis, or at times through the course of family businesses, how do we involve all of those people? And obviously, length of time in treatment makes a difference because we need a longer period of time to be able to work with all of those components. Next slide. I think as we talk about frequency and type of communication, we also have to talk about who matters in the family system. And obviously everyone matters, but to think about who the key stakeholders are on a generational level. Somebody's family of origin and formative experiences that help to shape who they are. How are those experiences now impacting the relationships of today? So certainly their spouse or their partner wasn't there back then, but they likely have recreated some of those dynamics. In a work or a school situation, how are some of those same coping strategies or emotional coping or relational strategies replaying themselves? And so who needs to be involved right now is a really important question that we continue to ask throughout the course of treatment. Now, our family therapists are calling regularly, and they're involving a number of people. So next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, keep that slide. I skipped ahead one. So as we look at weekly calls from both the primary therapist and the family therapist, we have equipped our group rooms. We have 7 full-size group rooms with 75-inch monitors so that, with some thoughtful inclusion, we can, through the use of some telehealth screening and utilizing our internal guidelines and different state guidelines, we can include family members into group. Once upon a time, we would have done some of this on site. We would have brought a family or a family member in and participated in that particular group. Well, now we can do that without the travel time, without the travel expense, and simply include someone into the group process. So as we look at the different types of participation that we can do now, these are the same interventions that we could have used before, but now we don't have some of the same barriers. So family sessions, we can have someone sitting with their therapist while they speak with their spouse, or while they speak with their parents, or while they have some conversations with their children. Those people may or may not have their own therapist with them or included on that call. The referent at times may join us for some of those conference calls. But it gives us the opportunity to have people see one another and to be able to read some of that nonverbal language that's so important for us to understand what the other person is seeing and feeling, and are you hearing me while we talk about this? So we've learned that the size of some of those screens matters. Trying to do that on an iPhone, while certainly I can get a visual, I can't get multiple people in, or suddenly the people, I can't relate to them because of sizing. With larger screens and with some of those technologies, we can have people be more appropriately sized, and it's a more consistent feel, both for the individuals and their family members. And it's provided us a really great opportunity to let people participate with fewer barriers. So some of the ways I've identified here that we can do that in Florida are through the use of video calls, video conferencing, which allows someone to participate in groups. We do participate, or we transitioned our family workshop, which is a multi-family platform, to be able to have multiple families participating virtually with their loved ones who are in a group room with their family therapists. And so those families get the benefit of doing some of that work together in a HIPAA compliant way. We also are doing virtual clinical impact visits where someone is popping into group. It got mentioned that, the crisis intervention of someone struggling with their ability to remain in treatment. Can I see that my family member is saying, look, I understand that this is hard for you, and it's really important that you stay right now, both for our family, for yourself, and for me. But to be able to see that is much more impactful than just doing the phone call or just hearing it from someone's therapist. So we've seen such positive results for some of those moments, but not just for that type of crisis intervention, for lots of interventions where an individual is saying, I'm not sure if I want to go back to the family business, or I'm not sure if I'm ready to dig into some of the work around this particular issue. For the families to be able to join and have some of those conversations, or to see the reaction that their loved one is having in group when being supported or when being challenged by their peer group, can be really powerful. We've at times had families participate for an entire week's worth of clinical programming virtually. So 3 groups a day, plus family sessions, plus the session with the psychiatrist, plus joining other opportunities to be able to really join and understand what's happening and where is my loved one struggling, but also how am I responding to that, and are there things that I can benefit from? Having a family member participate in groups without their loved one, so that they can continue to focus on that individualized treatment plan that they have developed. If they're struggling with their own ACA issues, how can they get some support for that within a clinical model that's supported by their referent and by their collaborative treatment team? And finally, we do continue to do on-site residential family programming. And residential family programming for us is an opportunity for someone to come into the treatment setting, live here. And we have some protocols in place due to COVID where someone is doing some pre-screening and then some on-site COVID testing and a short quarantine before they're physically a part of the community. But then for a minimum of a week, they're participating on-site and going to those groups and being able to gain the benefit for themselves of that type of intimacy and participation. Next slide. And I just want to mention that we've been doing residential family programming for many, many years and have really evolved its participation to the point where Dr. Phoenix Adams, who's the executive director at our Ocean Drive program, in conjunction with the FAU School of Social Work, did some research on the efficacy of Renaissance's residential family program. And you can see there some of the benefits that we saw in a statistically significant level for our family members. You know, and I'll highlight one of them because I think it really goes to the heart and core of what all of our family services are about, which is how do you help each family member identify what they need in order to get well. Clearly, we are focused on having both halves of that parallel process have the maximum opportunity for recovery, and that's what we want. But that isn't going to always happen on our time and our terms. So helping family members identify these are the things that you may be able to do to help your loved one. And now let's talk about these are the things that you can absolutely do to help yourself be well today. So when we talk about continuing care planning, we're talking about implementing, over a longer treatment stay, we're talking about implementing all of those things during the course of treatment so that when someone transitions out, we're not then transitioning them to that care plan. It's that they've already been engaged in that care plan so that their recovery can maintain a seamless process, even if their loved one's care plan needs to take a next physical step or a next treatment step. And that improved understanding and ability to implement greatly increases the likelihood that somebody's going to be able to maintain their own recovery. When we know that those moments of transition are always the highest stress and therefore always the highest risk. But family members gain some competence in their own recovery skills through practicing those things virtually and through practicing those things in real life throughout the course of treatment. So it becomes, as already has been said, a very practical model for our family members. And last slide. As we talk about that continuing care plan, as we said, it's been evolved and collaborated on over the course of weeks and months with the family therapist and with the referent, and with the accessibility of telehealth with some of our partner providers. If there's a great CBT therapist that I'm familiar with in Tampa, or a really amazing ACA therapist who might be a right fit for someone, in New Jersey, even if someone is in rural upstate New York, they may be able now, due to some telehealth changes, they may be able to see those people so that we can target who might be a best fit for them. And obviously we want to be collaborative with whoever the referent was that sent us that particular family and has the most familiarity with them. But if someone says to us, look, that's not my niche, do you know of somebody who's great? Well, we might now, and we might be able to eliminate an additional barrier to help somebody get the exact type of help that they need. And then the last point that I'll make before I wrap up is that the availability of family services and family meetings and our peer recovery network for families, which is so robust at all of our care and continuum. These families now can participate in the Thursday night Morristown, New Jersey meeting, even if they're here in Florida, or they can participate in the Plymouth meeting on that particular night, regardless of where they're located. So now I'm not geographically limited. Our families aren't geographically limited to, I can only go to those meetings within a reasonable drive time, and I need to take in traffic, and I need to take in getting home to my spouse or the kids, or to take care of my mom, or whatever those barriers might have been before. Now there are meetings available every single day. So as we're helping family members identify what do you need and how do you access resources, those resources are more readily available and are now less geographically limited. I think one of the things that we'll have to figure out on the other side of this, which is certainly a pleasant problem to have is, do those meetings continue to stay on some virtual platforms? Because the response from family members has been incredibly positive about their ability to access help and resources when they need it. So I think that's all that I need to talk about, and I think I'll throw it over to Caron Curtin for some questions.
Thank you so much, everyone. So now, as Ryan said, we'll answer some of the questions that our attendees submitted throughout the registration process. The first one is for you, Ryan, and it's, what advice do you have for someone in recovery, especially early recovery, who is quarantined with a family member in active addiction?
Wow. I mean, that's an extraordinarily challenging circumstance. And in that type of a circumstance, we're going to want that person to really develop some strong safety plans to identify what will I do if someone's use has gotten out of control or is now physically unsafe or is unable or unwilling to respect some of my physical boundaries and my needs, and having those type of contingency plans, but also to be able to identify how much support am I really going to need. Do I schedule calls with my support network? Do I have a private room where I can go to so that I can get out? Can I go on walks? What are the things that I need to do in order to take care of myself physically and emotionally? Those types of additional supports and having pre-planned outlets, can really help somebody in what you're describing, which is an extraordinarily stressful circumstance.
Thank you, Ryan. Absolutely. The next question I have here is for Melinda. What have you implemented to motivate family engagement in the treatment process?
That is a very good question, because what we found early on was with COVID, families were trying to figure out just what was happening within their homes. And so just based on the conflict that they were having, the crises that they were in because of the active, substance use, that was a way, at least for my program, we saw early on trying to get families involved it was hard. They just felt like, the kids and school and their homeschooling and everything going on, it just felt like one more thing they couldn't add to their plate. And so we had to get creative around that. And so part of what we did was helping the families understand that, yes, their loved one, is here in care, they're safe. And this is the family's opportunity to try to recollect themselves, to stabilize their mind, their emotions. It isn't just the physical piece, but really look at how crucial their self-care is. And yet their self-care now has to look different because of COVID-19. And so part of what we did was getting the families to understand that there was a lot that we can offer here in Wernersville through our signature programs as far as the therapeutic process while their loved one was here in care, as long as the family started to do some of their own work. And so we had to be creative with getting families motivated to work on themselves. And that was starting with education, trying to, attend some Al-Anon or Nar-Anon support groups online, start some readings, watch some, 20-minute videos. And so what we did was we told families that they would really benefit from the therapeutic process here in our signature programs if they were able to do for themselves what they needed to do to start to get healthier. And that really seemed to have a positive response, that even though, they felt like there was a lot that they were navigating, helping them understand that this really was for their own well-being. And they were already paying for the services. And so why not make the most of it? And so working with the patients and the families collaboratively, we had to get creative depending on the family system and the dynamics in order to get the families to participate more. But we found that spinning that therapeutic approach rather than just, let's talk about, treatment work and aftercare, no, we want you involved more. We want you to experience this along with your loved one. And so that was the way we handled that. And we really saw an increase in participation.
Thank you so much. The next question is for Vanessa. What is Caron doing to help patients develop skills to manage early recovery while still dealing with COVID?
So that again is an amazing question. And one of the things I want to do is just draw upon the answers we've already been given. We start that process while the patient and the family is in treatment. One of the benefits of having inpatient services in both clinical care and family therapists is we can start setting up ideas, simple ideas such as going to meetings, doing the videos, looking at some education tools. And then we can draw upon what we have already been sharing with the patients and their family members into how they are going to organize early recovery. So we will have a recovery action plan for the family. And we'll also include in that recovery action plan qualifiable things that they are going to do on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis to get through the early recovery process. So that includes how do you connect with virtual meetings? We'll introduce Zoom as we go through the process so families can understand, how do I use this? We are going to meet families on the level that they are able to function in as far as recovery supports. And then with the patient, we're looking at realistic goals that they can achieve over the early months of recovery, including supports. Referring to if there's a referral, we're going to bring in the referral's interests as well as some of their own clinical knowledge. If the family is in support of the patient having more treatment, then we're going to start that process early in the, probably I'd say with day 14, with really looking at what does the family feel the need for continuing care is. But this is an engaged process, and it is not going to be simply your loved one leaves treatment, returns home, and there's no plan. We are consistently working on that plan from the time the patient comes into treatment with the family and the patient, clarifying it as we move along. So by the 20th day in treatment, there is already discussion of what the expectations are when the patient comes home, if the patient is coming home, and if not, what's a healthy recovery plan for not just the patient's continued recovery process, the family. We want families to also, as Melinda said, start to go to meetings through Zoom meetings or whatever their capability is as far as connecting virtually. We want them to participate in what we have available to them on our Caron websites, as well as encourage them to look at other resources. We want them to participate in listening to podcasts. So we're going to include that in assignments as they move along in the process with their loved one here in treatment. The patient is also doing work on the reality of their return home and what their expectations are for their long-term recovery needs. So as we move through the process of treatment, the patient is going to leave here with a recovery action plan, and the family is going to leave with a recovery action plan. And as I said, there is a ability for the families to call us and reach out and ask questions, express concerns, and the hope is that they connect with families in recovery through our family network, which includes family support groups, as well as alumni services for the patient. 12-step contacts is something that we also have established here at Caron Warnersville for the patients, so that they are able to talk to someone who is living the recovery program. And of course, we are going to include 12-step recovery as part of both the continuing care plan of the patient and the families. All of this, I do want to say, is part of the cost for treatment. So the family services, the education, the therapy that we are applying, that is a part of the tuition to come here at Caron. So we really encourage families to take the maximum advantage of it and find out what we have available to them and to be a part of every aspect of continuing care planning and knowing what early recovery expectations are. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. And Ryan, similarly, maybe you can touch on how we handle the costs down in Florida. And the other question that they asked here is, how is Caron increasing engagement with our combination of services?
Sure. So I'll take those in two parts. And as Vanessa just said, there's a consistency in the Caron continuum. The cost of residential family programming, the cost of clinical impact visits, the cost of speaking with your family therapist is included in the cost of treatment. There are no separate costs for family services because we recognize the necessity of treating every member of the family. So we don't want to create another barrier. It's simply a part of the cost. It's not an additional cost. And that's true across our campuses. I think as we talk about how do we continue to increase some of the engagement, we really have seen families latch on to the opportunity that instead of just a phone call with my therapist as we talk about some things, I literally get to see my therapist. And so the technology has allowed us to increase engagement by increasing the connection. It truly is what we hope for with technology, is that we decrease isolation and increase connection when it's used appropriately.
Thank you, Ryan. I think we have time for one more, and I'm going to give this one to Vanessa. What education materials and support groups are available to families after a patient discharges from Caron? I think we did touch on it a bit, but if you could just reiterate.
We did touch on it a bit. One of the amazing things that Caron started probably about actually about 15 years ago, is we started to expand on our alumni services, and we saw the necessity and need for families, as Ryan and Melinda shared, to have their own support groups. So those have grown exponentially. They're available virtually as well. But we also have podcasts that are generated through Caron. And then we also have a whole family resource page that we send families so that they can continue the work that they started while their loved one was in treatment. Continuum of care is essential for families as well as the patient. So as we already stated, there is just everything available, from someone who's new to the recovery process to a family member or a patient who has multiple years of recovery and has relapsed. So when we individualize this for the families. So if I'm working with a family, it's a couple and they have had years of recovery together before relapse, then we're not going to go through the novice material of early recovery. We're going to look at how do we substantiate return to recovery and what are their unique needs. But everything that we are offering families is available virtually. It's based on consistency, and it really is an option on how much they want to engage and involved. For the patients, that continuum of care is going to be far more structured, and it is going to be something that they are going to be solely responsible for. So we also practice a little bit with the families and patients here in treatment of creating detachment from feeling the need to monitor or manage each other's recovery. And then again, we give them the resources so that they can continue to evolve that on their own. Now, another thing I do want to add is if families decide, hey, we really appreciate what we've experienced here. We have a program called My First Year in Recovery that has a family component that can stay with families for the full year of early recovery on, I believe, a bi-monthly basis, and stay in contact with them as they grow their own program organically at home. And then they start to realize what are some of the resources at home as well. And as we go through this discussion, I've realized, and I just wanted to put out there, that the Family Recovery Action Plan is based on 5 main areas: 12-step recovery, relationships, personal self-care around the mental aspects of the family needs, emotional health, well-being, and even their spiritual growth is going to be something they explore. So again, things are more concrete, structured, and applicable to each individual family. Families can also contact us up to 6 months after their loved one discharges to participate in our education programs. And as Melinda said earlier, we are growing those programs. So the growth of that program may be something that families who have already gone through our WebEx family education programs may want to come back and explore too. So again, allowing families to have some flexibility as well as accountability in the whole process of treatment, early recovery, and continuum of care is something we are encouraging them to be part of. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone again for such a comprehensive discussion today. To complement today's presentation, Caron is proud to offer our digital learning program, a comprehensive library of online courses centered on substance use disorder prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery. These programs can be completed safely at home and there is no cost. Please note these courses do not carry any CE credits. On Caron's digital platform, there is a course specifically on families and addiction titled The Impact of Substance Use Disorders on the Family, Hope for Recovery. After today's presentation, you will receive a follow-up email with the link to this platform. Please join us next Tuesday, June 30th, for the second installment in our Focusing on Family Systems webinar series, as we welcome Christina Getz, Student Assistance Program Coordinator, who will discuss resilient, brave, and courageous, how to empower children and siblings impacted by addiction in the family. Please watch your email for additional information and to register in advance. Also, remember to reach out to your local regional resource director for information or if you have any questions. Thank you again for joining us and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.